who are going to be our feature match. We have Ben Ungar and Will Kowalczyk. So let's go ahead and head down to the feature match area so we can see what they are playing. We have Will on the right-hand side of your screen with the deck list officially named Big Rakdos, along with Ben Ungar on the left, who I guess forgot the big part of the big domain deck.
Yeah, I think domain is just inherently big. That is its role in the format. That's what it's trying to do. And for Rakdos, Will actually registered Rakdos decks at different points in the spectrum in all three formats, Standard, Modern, and Pioneer. And even just in Standard alone, there are a few different varieties of Rakdos. You got the low to the ground one with inties and more of these aggressive creatures. Kind of a mid-rangey deck, looks kind of like the Pioneer version. This is not that, Devin. This is big Rakdos.
And when you say big, you really do mean big. There are 3 copies of Atali Primal Conqueror, 2 Chandra Hope's Beacon, along with 4 Trumpeting Carnosaurs, and 4, yes, you heard that right, 4 Breach the Multiverse. So a total of 7 7-mana cards. So, when we say big Rakdos, this is as big as you can possibly get.
Yeah, we also have Big Score, letting you jump up in mana, ramp up to those 7 drops. And you could also call but also dinosaur there for Ben. So I've been practicing my dinosaur sounds to prepare for this. I don't know about you, but I'm willing to bust those out at a moment's notice if needed.
Yeah, and then for Ben Unger, we have the domain deck. As you mentioned, this is kind of like your traditional big deck. So a lot of ramp spells in the form of Invasion of Zendikar and Topiary Stomper, and that is going to go us kind of curve into the late game, which is 3 Atraxa Grand Unifier, 1 Nissa Ascendant Animist, a Wandering Emperor, and then 4 Archangel of Wrath, which is a relatively flexible card against the aggressive decks. You can just kind of play it on turn 4 as a 3/4 blocker, but it scales nicely later in the game, being able to kind of pick off a couple of things. But probably not going to be able to pick off too much in this matchup since, as we talked about, all of Will's cards are just kind of go over the top of that.
Yeah, Archangel might pick off a Blood Tithe Harvester or an Inti against small Rakdos. Against big Rakdos, yeah, it's Archangel looks kind of puny by comparison at that point.
Yeah, and then just as far as kind of this matchup dynamic, as far as who's ahead, who's behind, I kind of have to assume that Will is a relatively large favorite in this matchup. Just 4 copies of Breach the Multiverse. If the game goes long, you're eventually going to get to a point where you cast one of those, and a lot of stuff in Ben's deck. Like you can imagine if you cast Breach the Multiverse, you hit say an Atali off of your graveyard and an Atraxa off of theirs. Atali can go into more stuff, Atraxa drawing you cards, and that would basically just be game over on the spot here for Will.
Yeah, there's some debate over is Domain meant to keep in their Atraxas post-board, given that it's such a good hit for your opponent's Atalis and Breaches. And without those, it's harder to find a way to win, but then turns out if your opponent just free rolls your own Atraxa against you, it's also pretty hard to win. So a tough squeeze either way. We'll see how Ben navigates that decision in the post-board games. But yeah, this big Rakdos deck, it is designed to beat up on Domain, make some sacrifices elsewhere to do that, but it is very good at that specific goal, and it looks like we are on track to see that in action here in Game 1. Although, maybe it's time for the dinosaur sounds. This is an odd pair of cards to flip with Atali. A Brotherhood's End that does literally nothing, and I guess a Topiary Stomper that gives you a more permanent mana source to set up for the next 7 drop. So not the worst thing in the world, but certainly not what Will was hoping for.
Yeah, this is probably as bad as it gets if you like in terms of casting and resolving Atali, hitting a 4/4 and a basic brick. But I mean, sacrificing 2 treasures meant that Will was on 5 lands, but now that Topiary Stomper gives you the 6th land, and then if Will has untapped land and another one of his, a plethora of 7 drops, we can just kind of go for it again next turn. So even one of the worst probable scenarios for Will still ends up being pretty good and just has a 7/7 on the battlefield. And then we kind of like talk about from, from Ben's perspective, like what are Ben's good plays here? I mean, you could go land Archangel of Wrath to be able to kill the Topiary Stomper, but it still doesn't really get you anywhere against this Atali because Ben's Topiary Stompers, as of right now, currently can't block. Let's see, there's, I believe, an invasion in Ben's hand. Looks like that's what we're going to go towards. Maybe something like invasion plus binding on the Atali to flip the invasion, because you would be able to attack with the stompers, you attack with both, and then maybe one gets traded for it, but the invasion still flips. And I mean, that's not a bad turn, but we all know, like we said, Will just has an insane amount of cards that just he can just untap, tap all of his lands, and put a spell onto the stack that's just going to give him an insane amount of value, more than probably what any of Ben's cards can muster up.
Yeah, it would be an aggressive use of a binding, but I think in this matchup, when there are just so many scary things waiting as the game goes on, maybe you have to take this more aggressive stance and just try and get the game over with somehow.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Ben maybe realizes that this game. Oh yeah, you can actually send one face because the Will's Topiary Stomper can't block. But yeah, Ben probably realizes that the longer the game goes, the much less favored he is. So Ben's probably the only realistic way for him to win is just kind of close out these games with Topiary Stompers and maybe hope that Will misses a beat. Like maybe Will's hand is all 7 drops and no land, but as I say that, there's the untapped land. So yeah, we're only tapping 6 here. That's not quite the 7. So it looks like we're gonna go for Carnosaur here. And compared to Atali, this one's pretty tame. Hitting a removal spell, that's probably gonna take out the flipped invasion. But I mean, as far as Ben is concerned, it could have been worse.
Yeah, and now maybe if Ben has a way to kill the Carnosaur, can attack again, like you could see how it could work, or maybe now if Ben has an Atraxa, like this would be a great time to kind of gas back up as a threat. And if Will just doesn't have a good follow up, maybe that just takes over the game.
Right, something like untap land, Atraxa, leave a white source up, hit a binding the Carnosaur, send with both topiaries, will trades for 1, falls to 12. But then you still have, the Atraxa and the other Stomper in play. And, and maybe if Will just doesn't have, if Ben can dodge one payoff for 1 turn, maybe that 1 turn is good enough for Ben to close out the game here. We're going to lead with the Beanstalk. That's probably not the card he ideally wanted to cast here. Definitely wants to kind of, like you said, find removal or potentially one of those big threats.
This might actually be a nice spot for an Archangel. If Ben can attack, if Will blocks with the Carnosaur, then you finish that one off, get a shock upstairs as well. It wouldn't be the worst thing. It looks like he has, I think, 2 Archangels in hand.
Yeah, I think Ben's hand is 2 Archangels, 3 Wraths, and he might have picked up an Atraxa off of the Beanstalk. So I believe that's something along the lines of what the contents of Ben's hands is. So we're going to attack with both. Carnosaur is going to block 1. Other one's going to get traded for. And then Archangel is going to deal 2 to Will and finish off the Carnosaur. It's going to put Will to 14, Ben up to 18. And we've kind of sort of dealt with the first couple of threats, but again, as we talked about, Will just has so many of those, and if any of them get cast, I mean, Ben's only hope is that Will's hand is just all like removal, I guess.
Yeah, I wonder if the hand is just all angels and sweepers, if maybe the move is you play a Sunfall or something, you draw a card, you get a 4 for Incubator, and then you have the freedom to deploy those Archangels on the following turn, and the sweepers are looking a little awkward there. Like you can't really cycle them, you can't really use them to actually sweep anything. And if you have enough of them, maybe it makes sense to just fire that one off there instead.
Yeah, another card that Ben could potentially look for is something like Herd Migration, where if Ben is cast a Herd Migration just for 7 mana, you just put 15 power into play. And maybe if Will has a turn where it's like, Carnosaur removal spell, kill 1, you still have 4 3/3s, untap, answer the Carnosaur, hit for 12, and all of a sudden it's maybe looking like you said, you can definitely see a way for Ben to potentially steal this game. But yeah, we're gonna need one of those big cards, and I believe, like I said, I think there was an Atraxa drawn off of the Beanstalk trigger, so I believe at the bare minimum, Ben can at least lead on that. Although I might be getting the hands wrong. I'm not 100% positive.
Yeah, Five Color Angels, also a good name for this domain deck. So this is Angels versus Dinosaurs dual decks, if you like.
Well, sometimes the angels have to fight their own angels off of Breach, or Italia, I guess.
I did have a game in testing this matchup where my first Atali hit my opponent's Beanstalk, and then the second Atali, it turns out, drew a lot of cards,
Mm.
even more than it needed to. But yeah, these games where the 7 drops just go back and forth, uh, this is Battle Cruiser Magic. These are the big swings which your Commander game could only dream of.
So Atraxa triggering up the Beanstalk. We'll go ahead and pick up a card, leaving up a white mana for that Leyline Binding, which Ben does find, and also finds that Herd Migration. That's 15 power. So likely going to take Binding Migration, another Atraxa, and then the Invasion, I guess.
That makes sense. Worth noting that Will does have 3 Brotherhood's End. We saw one of those cascaded into earlier, and 3 Burn Down the House. So a lot of ways to sweep up a herd migration, which would make sense for him to be holding some. Hasn't really had a good window to cast those just yet. But hey, it's yet another big threat that demands an immediate answer. So not going to turn it down.
So Ben choosing to, I forget the wording on Atraxa. Does it specify battle? It says for each card type. So I believe, yeah, it does specify battle. So Ben just,
It does. Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, Atraxa is actually how we learned that battles existed first. Like that was the kind of Tarmogoyf style preview of the new card type.
Yeah, bringing that up, I do remember when Tarmogoyf was first printed, and there was just all this like aura around what is a planeswalker, and nobody had any idea, and that was some pretty good times. But
In
Ben able,
in retrospect, that maybe distracted us from the fact that it turns out Tarmogoyf was just very broken by itself. Regardless of what this new Planeswalker thing is.
yeah, maybe that's the same thing with Atraxa. Atraxa just distracted us from the angelic problem. And Ben lining up some mana here. Not sure we're going for. My guess is the herd migration, probably. Figuring out the best way to tap. Okay, we're going for an Archangel. That's going to deal 4 to Will. So it's going to put Will to 10. Oh, or 20. Never mind. Life total's going a bit awry there. But I believe Will, I think, should be a 10. Oh, never mind. We're going to game 2. That's why the life totals were going awry. I get
Yeah.
it now. All right. Well, we didn't really expect that to happen, but Ben able to just kind of steal that game against Will. Will was able to resolve an Atali, and the Atali didn't hit too much, but hit a Topiary Stomper and then a blank Brotherhood's End. And then after that, Carnosaur just wasn't able to find an additional threat. If you see Ben kind of stealing that game that we thought Will was a pretty heavy favorite in.
Yeah, you did see there a structural flaw of this big Rakdos deck, which is you don't really have ways to filter cards or cycle through cards, except for Big Score, which is kind of tying the room together. So you have all of these big haymakers at the top, and then all of the lands that you need to cast them, and a bunch of removal spells, which aren't really ideal here. And so, yeah, you can easily just draw the wrong half of your deck, or all of your big hits, Atali and Carnosaur and Breach. None of those are deterministic. You cast those, you don't know how good it's going to be just yet. And that's part of the fun of watching the deck and playing the deck. But it does mean that, yeah, sometimes your Atali kind of comes in a bit too low, and that was your big finish, and you just kind of sputter out after that. So that's definitely something that can happen with this deck, and one reason why I would have been reluctant to register it myself, I think. But after sideboard, when you get to upgrade a lot of those weaker cards into more relevant cards, then that's going to happen a little bit less often.
Yeah, and speaking of sideboard, we do have Will Kowalczyk's big Rakdos here. So cards that we want to be, this is kind of tough. So Will has Barrage, 4 Lithomythic Barrage, 4 Duress, 2 Cut Down, 2 Shieldred, 3 Graveyard Trespasser. Now, as far as a structural kind of matchup wise, do we want to go towards those mid-range threats in the form of Shield or Trespasser? We definitely want the Duresses, but because Ben is relatively good at answering those kind of small creatures, like one for one, sort of with Sunfall and things like that. I'm not sure if you want to go towards those. What do you think about that, Dom? I believe, Dom, I think you might be muted right now. So if we could just maybe double check that. I currently don't know. Just checking my audio here. I'm not sure that we can hear Dom, but we'll see if we can get that fixed for you in just a second. I don't know if anybody else is having that problem. Maybe it's on my end. We'll double check this. But anyways, Will's sideboard here, like I said, the 4 Duresses, potentially the mid-range threats, and we will have to see. So maybe we can take a look at the other sideboard here for Ben Ungar. We can pull that up real quick here. And looks like Ben's sideboard here. We have a couple of temporary lockdowns, a depopulate, a couple of knockout blows, negates, disdainful strokes, destroy evils, barrage, Jace, obstinate Baloth, and a Chrome host seed shark. Dom, I think you're back. Maybe we do a little test. Dom, can we hear you, Dom? All right. It looks like I can still currently not hear Dom. So we'll have to see if we can maybe get that fixed. But as far as Ben is concerned, negate and disdainful stroke pretty good here because disdainful stroke answers both breach and Carnosaur. Although I guess not against Cavernous Souls, but negate stroke able to answer the breach the multiverses. So those could potentially come in alongside the Destroy Evil for the big threats, maybe. Jace the Perfected Mind if you want to go towards additional threats. And then Chrome Host Sea Shark is kind of like the sort of the mid-range threat here. But we will have to see how players want to approach this. And yeah, like we saw game one, very interesting sort of display there where we really thought Will was going to be very far ahead. And it ended up that Ben was just able to kind of steal that game from out of nowhere. Now I'm looking at production and it looks like we might have everybody's favorite power rankings. If we can take a look and see if we can get that up on your screen for you. Will Kowalczyk, 9th overall. So 5th in Pioneer. That's total Pioneer matches won throughout the year. 1st in Modern. That's pretty impressive. 5th in Elimination wins. That's matches won in top 8. Uh, dead last in ELO Project. Well, and then 9th in Pure ranking. That was 6 players who are not participating in Champs who ranked these 16 players. Now, I don't know if we have a slide for Ben as well, potentially. Not sure if we have that. Looks like we might. There you go. Ben Unger, 11th overall. So 2nd in Pioneer, 5th in Modern, 14th in Elimination wins, 11th in ELO Project, and 14th in Pure rankings. So this is kind of like, players making tier lists and all those tier list memes that you've seen on Twitter. I have to say, I don't know if Dom's back. I can't tell. Still, nope. Dom still currently cannot hear Dom. I know I could see your lips moving, but I can't hear you. So we're just gonna keep pushing on until we get Dom back. So I guess chat, you're stuck here with me for now. But we do have, as we said, Ben winning game number 1. As far as the matchup post board is concerned, I'm not sure who necessarily gains more. Will does have a pretty, I think, a relatively sizable advantage in terms of the matchup. But as far as the post board games, not. I'm just gonna see. Trying to get Dom back here for a second. All right, looks like Twitch chat is saying that they also cannot hear Dom, so it's not just me. Wasn't sure if it was just me. I checked my headset too to make sure that I didn't turn it on or off, but we'll have to see if we can maybe get Dom back here in a second. But for now, chat, you are stuck with me. All right, so we have the appropriate correct duress art being cast here, and Ben just kind of flopping that migration into the graveyard. Rest of the hand is Topiary Stomper, Archangel of Wrath, and a couple of lands. All right, Dom, you're back. Try and speak. See if I can hear you. Still got nothing. I don't know, Dom. I don't know what happened. Sorry, we can figure this out. If we all believe in Dom, I believe that Dom can come back. We believe in him. So we got a couple of lands here for players. Nothing too crazy going on here. Just see. Okay, so land drops being made for both players. We got a Topiary Stomper here for Ben. It's going to go ahead and find a basic land. And we'll have to see what Will can muster up after this. Oh, I heard something. I heard an audible noise. That must be the mic being unplugged.
If I made dinosaur sounds.
There we go. Dom,
There we
you're
go.
back.
Let's go.
This is the classic tech support issue of unplug it and plug it back in. I think we figured it out. We're actually tech support professionals. I don't know if chat knows
Never
that,
fails. I am an official computer scientist, so using that knowledge that I studied for years, I finally solved my issue. So meanwhile, here on the battlefield, we have, I guess, dinosaurs versus predators dual decks going on here. Usually, Shieldred has a better end of that, but usually this particular dinosaur is a prelude to bigger and better things for the round deck. So Shieldred, I think it makes sense to have that one in the deck. You need some amount of those threats, and Shieldred is a card which does demand an answer by itself, the way that something like a Trespasser doesn't. Gets around Archangel, punishes them for up the Beanstalk and cards like that. So I do like the Shieldreds a lot. And again, Shieldred can't be your only thing, but maybe if this is followed up by a 6-drop, a 7-drop, it's gonna get Will across the line here.
Yeah, this is almost like those March of the Machines team ups where Angels plus Dinosaurs just kind of on the same card, like a Atraxa plus Atali. I don't even know what the Atraxa and Atali card would be, but something along those lines. We see looks like a Field of Ruin being fired off here for Will. Ben notably getting a basic island, already has a mountain in play. By the way, big fan of Ben's basic land choices. Those just absolutely beautiful. I don't know how you feel about those.
Yeah, I think my pitch for the Atraxa and Atali card would be you Atali into a card of each card type from the top 10 cards of each person's deck. How does that sound?
Balanced. I mean, if we're talking about
game designers out there, hit me up.
If we're talking about fire design philosophy, that would probably cost like 5 mana, reasonable.
Look, you can never have too much of a good thing, just take the chocolate, take the peanut butter, just smush them together there.
There's an Archangel of Wrath here for Ben. It's gonna kind of just go upstairs. Don't really have any other good targets. Not necessarily how Ben would want this game to go. And we did talk about during sideboarding, we weren't sure if those mid-range threats were going to come in, but looks like Will deciding that Shieldred is powerful enough, and most likely, realistically, it's probably just that he has enough bad cards. Like there's enough go for the throats and all of that nonsense that he just wants to get out of his deck and wants any card that just has relevant text at all against Ben.
Yeah, the Archangel looking a little mopey here, right? Like it can't shoot down Shieldred, can't really block Shieldred, and then it can attack and buy back some of that life and race a bit that way. But that's not a great investment for your, a card that you spent 6 mana on up front.
Yeah, well, speaking of spending 6 mana and not getting a great investment, Will hit an Iron Crag off of Carnosaur, which, doesn't look great. But if Will has a 7-drop and no additional land, then it's one of the better things he could have hit, I guess, assuming that that's the case. But we'll have to see. There's an Atraxa for Ben that is going to reveal... All right, we got a Forest. And it looks like a lot of lands. There's a Disdainful Stroke, a Beanstalk, and an Invasion. That's a relatively tame Atraxa.
It's still an Atraxa though. That's a nice use of 7 mana. But yeah, now the door is open for Will to come back in kind with an Atali, a Breach the Multiverse. there's no cruelty of Gix in Will's version, so the line of kill your Atraxa, then reanimate it is not on the table here in the same way, but lots of ways that Will can outscale an Atraxa, which is easier said than done.
Yeah, he'll just hit his own attacks off a breach. It's fine. But
His
yeah,
own Atraxa?
well, he'll hit Ben's. You know what I mean. You know what I mean. He'll hit Ben's Atraxa. I also missed the Archangel from the Atraxa, so it was actually a 5-card Atraxa. So I mean, okay, fine. Archangel, Disdainful Stroke, Beanstalk, Invasion land. We'll take it. And land here for Will. I wonder if we are potentially going to transform. I guess transform the Iron Craig. I don't know what the wording you would use on that. Um, and it looks like we are going to get an interview with the winner of this match after. So be sure to stay tuned for that if you're watching at home. Okay, go for the throw, taking out Atraxa. Topiary Stomper is apparently on chump block duty. That's not necessarily where you want to be, but yeah, Ben just falling way too far behind in life total.
Funnily enough, Archangel off of an opposing Atali, given that this is not just big, but Rakdos, you can actually double kick an Archangel that you hit that way if you have the spare mana. So you can kind of turn some of Ben's cards against him in that sense. Some of the others, like Herd Migration, less impressive if being cast from the other side, but you can still kind of get the roulette wheel to land in interesting places.
Love it. Absolutely love it. And as you mentioned, maybe eventually hits like excuse me, a up the beanstalk, could like up the beanstalk and then cast something else to kind of just draw more cards because Will just has a plethora of 7 drops here. Okay, so Ben's at 4, facing down a whole lot of power and an active Shield Rid. Does have a whole bunch of cards in hand from that attracts a turn, but it's not clear that any of them really answer the board in a meaningful way. Like you said, I mean, you can Archangel. These creatures have 5 and 6 toughness, so that's not really going to do much. I guess you can like Archangel, Dome Will for 4, go to 8, double block Carnosaur, gain 6, go to 14. Maybe that gets you somewhere, but it's unclear if that does.
Yeah, and you can't even lead off with Beanstalk to keep trying to dig for answers because drawing cards in the face of the shielded is a really risky proposition, and it's mandatory. You can't decline. So it's often dangerous in the domain mirrors actually, where you're at risk of decking, but also in spots like this where if your opponent has a Shieldred or something like a Fairy Mastermind out of the Esper decks, you have to draw the card and you have to punish yourself for doing it.
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever seen somebody with 8 cards in hand be in a worse position, but Ben has found a way to manage that. Yeah, just has like a lot of counter spells that were a little too late to the party, and there's a Cavern of Souls anyway, so it's not even clear the counter spells would have done that much. And yeah, just couldn't find like a leyline binding for the Shieldred or any sort of. I mean, even a Herd Migration wouldn't be too bad, right? You make 5/3/3s; those are
Yeah.
reasonable blockers. Like that would be a fine turn for Ben. Just doesn't have any of those. That his one payoff got answered and just doesn't really have anything left over.
Yeah, Ben cast an Atraxa that drew what 4 spells and a freebie land, and somehow that was mediocre in the face of what Will had just up front left over.
So we have a Topiary Stomper that gives us a decent double block on the Carnosaur at least. That means the Carnosaur can only trade for one of these two and gain a little bit of life. So on the board, you can double block Carnosaur, go to 7. Shieldred takes puts you back to 3. If I do my math right, and then the draw trigger puts you to 1. So theoretically has a turn left, but still gonna need A, gonna need Will to brick, and B, probably gonna have to draw something good too.
Yeah, and then if you are trying to double block the Carnosaur, then things get kind of funky if Will has removal or like another Carnosaur to damage something so that 3 damage is going to trample over. So it's still very dicey, even if you manage to line up those blocks properly.
Yeah, so Ben's actually just going to go ahead and play a second Angel with no trigger, just to give him a little bit better blocks. Will's going to leave with a big score here. Big score is going to gain a little bit of life, but more importantly, dig him closer to more of those 6 or 7 drops that potentially could get cast this turn. We'll have to see what Will draws here. We're tapping some mana. That is a Chandra Hope's Beacon, and that looks like the game is over. So we, Will Kowalczyk, going to be winning game number 2, and we are going to be going to game number 3 here. That's kind of more how we thought it was going to go. It honestly still surprised that Ben was able to take that game 1 down, but we are going to be going to game 3 here with Ben on the play. And I mean, how do you, the matchup is still, we have to assume that Will's favored, right?
I think so, yeah. And you saw the Shieldrids that we said maybe were a little marginal coming in mostly as upgrades to removal. That Shieldred effectively soloed that game by itself. And if that was just yet another Brotherhood's End or something, then maybe we're telling a different story right now. So a meaningful upgrade, I think, and these duresses are really nice as well. From Ben's side, it's kind of a weird situation where there are fewer dead cards to upgrade, and so his deck improves by less, which is kind of a good problem to have. But yeah, I still would like Will side of this matchup. Maybe Ben on the play. If you can actually get underneath the Rakdos deck, you have the Stomper into Invasion nut draw or something like that, or you have a negate for the one Breach the Multiverse or something. Ben has some moves, but I think on balance, yeah, I Will's deck is built for this matchup specifically, and I think it can deliver on that still.
So basically, what you're saying is that Ben has to transform into a Delver deck where we just go Torpedo Stomper into 4 mana Archangel, or maybe even kick the Archangel once to deal 2, and then hold up some counter spells there. Jokingly, but I mean, realistically, that could be a path to victory, right? You just like have an early Stomper into Invasion, and then that one turn you attack, flip the Invasion, have 8 power in play, hold up a couple of counter spells. But the other issue with the counter spells is the presence of Cavern of Souls in Will's deck list. There are 3 copies alongside
Hmm.
the 4 Carnosaurs, the 3 Atalis, and the Shieldrids in the post-board game. So, if Will finds a Cavern of Souls and Ben has, a counter spell, that lineup doesn't look super great unless the payoff is Breach, in which case then you can actually, your counter spells work against that card.
Yeah, or sometimes your negate's not going to hit the dinosaurs either way, but maybe to get there, Will needs to resolve a big score or something, and if you negate the big score, that's going to set him back a lot. So the Cavern in both of these decks, honestly, is a big upgrade that really makes it harder to attack them through conventional means. But those cards are still going to be good in some capacity. You can find uses for those. But yeah, we've seen Arclight Phoenix as Delver already. This Topiary Stomper as Delver maybe makes some sense as well. The Seed Sharks help out a bit. You play a shark, you hold open a counterspell, and then you hit that thing. You get an incubator that adds even more pressure. So it's an option, honestly. And Ben on the play maybe can execute well on that. I don't know.
Yeah, if we look at Ben's hand here, 2 negates, a Herd Migration, an Archangel, and a pair of lands here, one of them being a Cavern of Souls. So, I mean, if you're Will, I almost just kind of want to take that Herd Migration and try to maybe hope that Ben just misses land drops or, doesn't find an
Yeah.
invasion or something along those lines. Would also need a land to go with the invasion. So, kind of makes sense to take this Herd Migration, but Will's deciding to go with one of the negates. Maybe has a further discard spell down the road and wants to try and clear the way for a big score.
Yeah, and if you know that your relevant spells can all be hit by negate, at some point you have to just fight through those and just getting the first one out of the way, you may as well just do that right now. And this is, I mean, how I was gonna say, how tempted are you to just negate this Ironcrag? And Ben is very tempted indeed, apparently.
Yeah, I'm kind of into it because if Will has a turn 3 Shieldred, your negate's not good enough. And if you let the Ironcrag resolve and then he will go Shieldred, you're just kind of stuck with that negate in hand. So I kind of like it just to delay the Shieldred for at least a turn. Although, it's not clear that Ben has a good enough answer to the Shieldred on turn 4, assuming that there is a fourth land here for Will.
Yeah, and the other thing is, it sounds a little obvious or flippant, but to cast your 6 and 7 mana spells, you need 6 or 7 mana sources. And this Rakdos deck, it doesn't have a conventional card draw, like you said, it doesn't have much card filtering. And so, yeah, if you can counterspell a mana source, then you can often delay those big haymakers by at least a turn, if not several turns.
Yeah, and Will's going to go ahead and fire off this Field of Ruin to get a red mana source. Potentially needs a red mana for big score, or just wants to, just use the mana while we have it available to us. We'll have to see what Will's follow up here. Does have a decent amount of 4 drops. We mentioned the shield rids, the big scores, one of those. And knowing the 75s too, if we take a look back at Ben's sideboard, there are 2 copies of negates and 2 copies of disdainful strokes. So with both of those negates gone, that's actually really big knowledge that Will no longer has to worry about negate on breach. So, there are less things to worry about from Will's side.
Exactly. And this big score, in the face of 2 negates, 2 strokes, or whatever, might feel riskier. But once you've seen both negates are gone, and you know most of Ben's hand, you can fire that one off and feel pretty safe about it.
And the big score does resolve here, so we'll have to see which, if Will has a follow up, and Cavern Soul's perfect because that fights through the disdainful strokes that we don't know that is Ben's hand, but we know that those are the only counter spells left over. And here's Anatoly. So let's see if we can hit Anatraxa. There's the Archangel you mentioned, and Carnosaur. Well, that's a pretty good one, Dom. What do you think about that?
Yeah, let's spin the wheel again. Let's keep going.
Let's keep going. I kind of wish that Will was playing Geological Appraiser just so you could do like this and then Carnosaur into Appraiser into something else, and just kind of keep going.
You are the problem. You're why we keep having to ban these these cascade mechanics.
And then we see a Duress here for Ben. Ben does have a binding to respond with, so has some sort of interaction here. I don't know if it matters, but oh no, there is 4 colors. I thought the binding cost 3. So 2 mana binding. Gonna take off the Atali, and what else do we have? Cycle Herd Migration. Okay, so that can potentially get a swamp. Although I saw an Archangel in Ben's hand, so might want to actually go for a second Plains here. See what he gets. Does go for the swamp. Interesting.
Yeah, maybe there's some debate too over, do you want the second white source, or if you draw a Sunfall, depending on how many left in the deck, you can cast that more easily. But when you have the Archangel in hand, got to be tempting to kind of trade your Archangel back with the other one, and then you don't love your spot still, but you're not under too much pressure in the short term.
Yep, and then drew Jetmir's Garden for turn, so the hand is face up. There's the Boseiju and the Archangel that we know about. I mean, this is 10 power. There's another Carnosaur here for Will. That's going to hit a big score. I mean, it just seems. I mean, outside of Ben keeping in Sunfalls, which there is the potential of that. He's going to need one of those cards to get out of it. It's not going to take one removal spell is not going to do it, or maybe even an Atraxa might. It's not even clear that that's good enough.
Yeah, Carnosaur is so big; it can just attack pretty freely into Atraxa.
Exactly. So Ben's going to take a draw step, see what we find. Does have that Archangel plus Swamp that we know about. Looks like he picked up a Beanstalk. So you can Beanstalk to try and hit Sunfall. And then if you miss Archangel with 1 activation, because we'll have 5 mana left over, that'll put you up to 15. You can bounce Archangels, go to 16, take 14, go to 2. Or no, 18, take 14, go to 4. So in theory, you can survive a turn, but you're really going to need one of those sweepers here for Ben.
I guess without the second white source too, even the hope of redrawing into Sunfall, I guess we've got the gun now, so that's fine. But then now the Archangel only gets to just shoot for one thing, doesn't even kill. It's kind of nemesis on the other side. Yeah, this is rough. Ben needed to hit. He took the gamble to try and stay in the game, but I think we're going to see him fully in the hole here before too long.
And there's a Shieldred here for Will. And I believe any removal spell is just lethal. Removal spell on the Archangel, that's 17 damage. And there's the removal spell. That should be good enough here, assuming we have life totals correct, and I believe we do. That is going to be the match. Will Kowalczyk taking it 2-1 over Ben. Ben was able to take that game 1, which we thought was a little surprising, but the post-board games kind of went as though we thought. And we'll be getting a winner's interview with Will here in just a little bit, Dom. But what do you think of that match?
I like big Rakdos. I like dinosaurs. That was everything I've wanted, both as a Timmy and as a as a thoughtful, educated Spike. I mean, that really just hit on all registers. But yeah, I mean, this Will made this deck choice with this in mind, and it did the job, passed the assignment. We'll see how it holds up against some of the blue black or Esper decks in the field, decks that maybe can go underneath it with counter magic, and that might be a little scarier. But if it can handle those, then you kind of outscale everything else, and so it's a pretty good place to be.
Absolutely. And it looks like we are ready to go to our winners interview here with Will Kowalczyk. So if we can go ahead and switch that over to that in a second. And here we go. Will Kowalczyk, congratulations on winning that match over Ben Ungar. Rakdos ramp, or I guess you call it Big Rakdos. Talk to me about this standard deck, the Rakdos deck. What caused you to play this many big cards?
Rakdos Ramp is just a deck I've been having probably the most fun with of all the standard decks. And it's also pretty good against, in my opinion, the most popular deck, Domain, because they don't run that many great answers to my threats like Atali, Beseech the Multiverse, and the Discover Dinosaur, Trumpeting Carnosaur. It all lines up pretty well. And against the more aggressive decks, I have a bunch of Wraths in the deck too.
We've seen you make a name for yourself on the series in a bunch of different formats with a bunch of different decks, kind of showing your range, putting yourself on the map. What was the process for you heading into this tournament where the stakes are pretty high and you have 3 different formats to prepare for with this kind of strange small metagame all at the same time?
For this, most of my testing was put into Modern and Standard, just because coming out of the RC season of Pioneer, I feel like had a lot of Pioneer testing. I kind of want to explore more Standard, which I haven't really touched much for a while. And then Modern, I did some testing for that too, but really kind of divvying it up in a way that give me the best experience for the formats I haven't tested much.
Well, you did end up registering Rakdos in all 3 formats, so
Yep.
you clearly like to play your Blood Crypts and Blackleaf Cliffs. What's kind of funny is if you think about it, all 3 of the Rakdos decks are kind of like in a different spot on the spectrum, where you have the standard deck is obviously all the way over here. You have the Pioneer deck that's a little bit more aggressive, and then I guess the Modern deck is probably more aggressive, and the Pioneer deck's kind of in the middle. But yeah, was that like a conscious decision? Do you think that Rakdos is the best for all 3? Was it a small field type of metagame call?
For me, I just like the more feel of the Rakdos decks, and it kind of fights on all the spectrum of Standard being a slower format that I could take advantage of with the big spell deck. Modern, there's a lot of diversity, and being able to play either a aggressive Grief Scam hand or a slower Shieldred mid-range Fable hand. And in Pioneer, it was just kind of, again, off the RC season, I was thinking Rakdos NT has been doing well. I'll just register more Rakdos mid-range and kind of see how it goes.
We saw you get off to a shaky start in Pioneer, but
Yeah.
starting to rebound here in Standard, win on the board. How do you feel about each of the formats in relative terms? So now that we're out of Pioneer for now, do you feel a little more confident?
Oh yeah, I'm feeling pretty good. Again, Pioneer being the format I did test of all the 3 formats the least for. I kind of wasn't expecting to do exceptional, but I'm feeling pretty good about Standard and Modern.
Awesome. Well, again, congratulations, Will. Thank you very much for taking the time to interview us, and best of luck in the rest.
Thank you.
All right. That was, like we said, winner of the match, Will Kowalczyk. Let's see if we can maybe get you back over to the booth in just a second here. And yeah, there was a very, very entertaining match. I don't know if we potentially have a backup match for you guys. Well, maybe we get production on that in just a second to see if we have kind of a feature match B or anything like that. But yeah, just the really, really good showcase to start the standard format. I don't know if we have the metagame slide as well. I'll see if I can pull up I did go ahead and get some information on the standard metagame. So it looks like we have, from my notes, I have 5 domain decks, 5 Esper mid, and then a whole slew of one-ofs. We got 1 Rakdos mid, 1 blue-white Mentor. That deck's pretty sweet. The Rakdos ramp deck that we just saw, Golgari mid-range, Dimir mid-range, and then the 4-color Legends deck. So I don't know how much standard you've been playing, Dom. I've been playing a little bit more in preparation for the RSQ season. But how does this metagame shake out? Does this sound like a standard format?
Yeah, I've been playing a decent amount, and yeah, I think Domain is the most popular deck, the litmus test that you have to pass, and then various varieties of Esper and Dimir and just color combinations in that range, and then the various Rakdos decks, which again go all across the spectrum. So I would say those are like the 3 big families of decks that you would expect, and then there's some spicy options like the Haughty Mentor deck that you see there, the 4-color Legends deck with Slogurk and Inti and all these crazy loops. So there's some fun stuff on the fringes if you're into that sort of thing. But if you're just looking at what are the decks I need to play, what are the decks I need to beat, then yeah, Domain, Esper, Rakdos, I would say are the 3 big ones.
Yeah, and then there's these spicy ones, the 4-color Legends deck and the Haughty Mentor deck. That was Kyle Gonzalez in the 4-color Legends, and then Chris Smith on the Mentor deck. So, very excited to see if maybe we can get one of those in the feature match area for you guys. But that's what standard looks like. I don't know if you want to take a look and see that if we have the slide available for the next upcoming event. That is oh no, never mind. We're going to the backup match. Okay, so we have a backup match. Wasn't sure if we have that, but we do in fact have a backup match. So let's see if we can get you down over there. We have Matthew Hoey on Esper Legends and Grayson Nemitz on Amalia combo. That can't be right. Okay, let's see if we can get this right. So Grayson, I believe, is Domain.
Grayson is Domain, yeah. Amalia would be a very exotic deck choice for this portion at least. And yeah, we're seeing Matthew Hoey on some variety of Esper. Like within the Esper label, there's a lot of card choices at each slot on the curve, lots of ways you can configure it. We saw the World Championships be run by like dedicated Esper legends. So Skrelv and Thalia and trying to curve out in that way. The lists that we see now are a little more kind of mid-rangey, all over the place. Different 2-drops, different 3-drops. You can really kind of pick your color focus, pick your strategic focus. For Harry's list, this is kind of classic Esper. Wedding Announcement, Virtue of Loyalty. He's got a pretty heavy white focus, but also some of the big new black cards like Deep Cavern Bat, for example, which like that's one of the real game changers from Lost Caverns of Ixalan, and you're going to see 4 copies of that in basically all of the black mid-range decks, unless they're going very big to the point where they're not even mid-range anymore.
Yeah, unless you're talking about big Rakdos. But yeah, the some of the Legends decks that we've seen in the past, had like 4 copies of Plaza of Heroes, and then you saw the stuff like 4 main deck Danik, 4 Thalias, 4 Fiends, and just somewhere between 25 to 28 Legends. This deck is, toned down the creature suite a bit. You mentioned those bats and those wedding announcements, but it's much more of a mid-range deck than a, dedicated Legends deck. And then the interaction here, we have 2 cut downs, 2 go for the throats, 2 destroy evils, and 4 make disappears to pair with our flash threats like Mastermind, Tishana's Tidebinder. And then as far as Grayson is concerned, kind of the typical fare for Domain. So you have the Beanstalks and the Invasion of Zendikars along with the Topiary Stompers to kind of ramp you out a little bit. 4 Archangel of Wrath, 3 Atraxas, 6 Wraths, a couple of 4 Herd Migrations, and then a Nissa. So we do have, that is kind of the deck list and the way that Grayson's deck is set up. But as far as the matchup is concerned, who do you think is ahead in this particular matchup, Dom?
So it's always weird to ask, how's your Esper matchup? Because so much of that depends on how the Esper deck is built. And the matchup is never too extreme in one direction or the other. And that's a big reason to play Esper, is that you always have a decent shot and the matchups are all pretty close. So if you said, you're going to be playing against a bunch of Domain, you can build an Esper deck with that in mind. Likewise, you're going to be playing against a lot of aggro, a lot of big Rakdos. You could build a deck that really targets those. Trying to do all of that at once is where the difficulty comes in, and it makes building those decks pretty difficult. I would prefer being on the Esper side, I think. And looking at Hoey's list, I think it's pretty well set up with this matchup. I need to know more before I can answer how the Esper matchup is most of the time.
Sure. That's fair. So as of right now, we don't know how the Esper matchup is, but maybe after this matchup, we can go ahead and figure that out. So, Grayson has a couple of up the beanstalks, and I have to imagine one of your better cards in this matchup because that can let you fight through those make disappears. Where even if your, say Atraxa or Herd Migration is getting make disappeared, you're still getting up 2 cards in that exchange. So you can use those cards to just find more big payoffs, and something's eventually gonna stick. They can't answer everything, so that's kind of the where Grayson's going. And Archangel of Wrath too, another very good card in this matchup in particular, because there are going to be situations where it's going to be able to kill multiple things from Matthew while also providing a 3/4 blocker. And if Hoey can't get that off the battlefield, that 3/4 blocks basically everything in Hoey's deck.
Yeah, Arcade is a really scary card. Often Atraxa is so expensive that you can go underneath it, or you can remove it and then kill them that turn, or they have the Sunfall you can recover. Archangel cleans up your board and it's just a big threat by itself, just kind of covering both axes there. So yeah, often that is the scariest card from the Esper side. And Hoey's list, it's almost a classic list in the sense of it has these white enchantments like the wedding announcements and the virtues and so on that really help to grind out the mid-range mirrors, but those are not really where you want to be against the Esper deck. They're just going way over the top of you. So you see other Esper decks in this field with your more flash threats or more counter spells or more flyers, or just 2-drop threats like the subterranean schooner, just other ways to really apply pressure early. Hoey's list moving a little bit away from that, at least in game one, and can get outmuscled a bit here as a response.
Absolutely. So looks like Hoey is going to. I saw a bat at some point. Not sure where that bat came from, but we're taking a draw step here. We have a Destroy Evil, a bat, and a card that I could not quite get a good glimpse of in Hoey's hand. And this bat can potentially take a threat, but if Grayson just has multiple threats in hand, it's not clear that that is necessarily good enough. And I think that qualifies as multiple threats, Dom.
Yes.
And
it sure does. Yeah, and this is the phase of the game where it like all hope is lost from the Esper side. Like if Grayson was on 8 life, let's say, maybe you think there's some way that you punk him out or you find a way, but from this position, it just feels totally hopeless.
Yeah, I mean, you can take one of the threats, but Grayson even just has the ability to cast Binding to kill the bat and draw 2 cards. So, I mean, that's really off the table. I mean, I guess Hoey does have the Destroy Evil in hand, so you can take the Atraxa, Binding gets cast, you can Destroy Evil with the trigger on the stack to make sure that your bat stays in play, but that's also giving Grayson 2 cards and still has an additional follow-up threat. Yeah, this one seems pretty difficult here for Grayson. And Grayson says, you know what? I'm not even going to fire off this Binding. I don't even, unless maybe the Triumph didn't produce white. I didn't quite get a good glimpse of that. Couldn't quite tell what that Triumph behind the island is. But in any case, we have a 1/1 along with the Topiary Stomper. And I mean, at the bare minimum, we can at least fire off we could fire off the Herd Migration to make a whole bunch of 3/3s. See if Grayson wants to go towards that and see what the follow up is here. We're tapping 6, which means probably an Archangel. Yeah. That's just going to clear out both of the creatures on Hoey's side of the battlefield and leave him with basically nothing left. And the Atraxa gets back. Yeah, this one seems, we don't like to call it too early on coverage, but I'm not really sure there's a sequence of cards that gets Hoey out of this one.
Yeah, we may have prematurely declared a game to be over one way that actually swung the other direction. This one, I think, is safe to say. Grayson will be up a game here, and yeah, Hoey has finally seen enough. Going to be moving on to the post-board games where his main deck, as you said, is laden down with some of these kind of clunkers that aren't suited for the matchup. He has a lot of good sideboard cards to replace him with, though, so maybe likes his odds better.
Yeah,
post-board.
and then speaking of the sideboard games, I don't know if we can get the sideboards up on screen for you guys. I know you were asking for deck lists, so if we could take a look and see exactly how Hoey is going to transform this particular deck list. So there are some cards here that kind of stand out to me: the Disdainful Strokes and the Negate, along with the Duresses. Past that, maybe want to go towards something like Shieldred as more of a mid-range threat, sticky threat. Not sure if there's anything else past then. You could maybe consider Destroy Evil for Leyline Binding, but I guess it also answers the Archangel as well. What do you think, Dom?
Yeah, Destroy Evil is one of the best removal spells in the matchup, and a reason to be an Esper, honestly, over Blue Black is that it has binding, so can even trade with the Beanstalk in a pinch if the game is lining up in that direction. So yeah, would definitely want all the Destroy Evils. Disable Stroke, Duress, those are pretty obvious. Negate. I think I like Shieldred too, where it can get swept up by sweepers and so on, but as we saw against the Rakdos deck, like sometimes it just takes over the game by itself and is pretty good against Archangel. So I like that one as well, I think. And then you could make a case for Loran maybe against like Beanstalk or Leyline Binding, but I think we have enough other good options to not need that one.
Absolutely. So that's going to be what Matthew Hoey is looking towards. If we can take a look at Grayson Nemitz's sideboard and a deck list, we will show you what Grayson has to work with here for a domain. Looks like we have a couple of Chrome Host Seed Sharks. Maybe wants to go towards those. Although it's kind of awkward when they have 4 Destroy Evils, but maybe those Destroy Evils are a bit taxed. You could go towards Jace the Perfected Mind, but not sure if you want to. Lithomantic Barrage is a good way to maybe answer Rafine. You have your own counter spells. Maybe you want to go towards Negate and then potentially the Lockdown to clean up the bats. Although past bat, it doesn't kill a ton of stuff.
Yeah, I do like the Shark. As you said, it dies to Destroy Evil, but so does everything. So you've got to fight through those at some point. And also, otherwise, just good blocker, works well with your own sweepers even. So I like that kind of lot. And then the Barrage is good answer to Rafine. Don't even have to pay the 1 for ward, but also can just snipe off a bat, snipe off some of the other cheaper threats. So pretty minimal sideboarding, I think. And then maybe shaving. Some people like to cut the invasions in this matchup. You can shave some of the top end stuff like an Atraxa. The Nissa it usually would come out, but maybe if you think these wedding announcements and virtues and stuff are staying in, you could argue for keeping it. But pretty minimal sideboarding for Grayson. Going to be more of the same mostly, whereas Hoey, this is part of the flexibility of the Esper deck, right? You get to kind of overhaul what you're doing as you see fit.
Exactly. So looks like we have game number 2 ready for you guys. And so just get that up on your screen in just a second. And like I said, we have Grayson Nemitz who won game number 1. Hoey's going to be on the play for game number 2. As far as sideboarding is concerned, we talked about how it seems like Hoey's going to be boarding in a lot more. So my guess is that, Hoey is going to be benefiting a lot more from sideboarding because he's sort of transforming his deck, gets to cut a lot of those dead cards, whereas Grayson's just getting some very minimal upgrades. But as far as like the matchup post board, I would have to imagine, I think I like Hoey's position a little bit more just because of how much he's improving.
I would agree with that. Yeah. And this is the question about how you target your Esper deck, right? So do you want to optimize the deck for the game 1 matchup at the cost of or other stuff, or do you kind of do what Hoey does and say, look, I have so many good sideboard cards that even if I'm a bit behind in game 1, I like my odds enough post board to make up the difference there, and I'm going to go with the configuration that maybe appeals to me more just across the board.
Absolutely. So Grayson appears to have taken a mulligan. So we're going to start on 6. Hoey, I believe, starting on 7. And we're off to the races. Restless Anchorage versus Jetmir's Garden. We'll have to see if Hoey has a turn 2 bat. Really wants to be able to, ideally would like to be able to answer a up the beanstalk 1 for 1 as opposed to something like Destroy Evil that puts you down on card parity. And, also it does have the 4 make disappear. So that could be something as well. Going to go ahead and pass on turn number 2. Grayson is going to go for the beanstalk. Let's see if Hoey has an answer. And you see, make disappear and Destroy Evil. Now the question is, from Hoey, do you fire off the make disappear here? And he does.
Yeah, ideally, you'd want Fairy Mastermind. That card has had a resurgence, partially because of how popular Domain and Beanstalk is, where your opponent has Beanstalk, you respond with Fairy Mastermind, you immediately get a card back, kind of keeping up with them on cards and have a source of pressure. And then every time they trigger it again, well, you get another card. So that works out really nicely. You're going to see here from Hoey, Tashana's Tiebinder countering the ETB on this second Beanstalk. Worth noting, though, Tiebinder is more specific in what it shuts down after that point. So the Beanstalk will keep its abilities, and future cards that would trigger it will still get Grayson that extra card. So easy to miss that. It's a little counterintuitive, but important detail there.
Definitely. So Tidebinder going, in the red zone here, and Hoey just wants to kind of almost play like this Delver sort of game. Yeah, Deep Cavern, bad hold
There
up
we
some
go. Yeah.
interaction. Yeah, just more Delvers. And there's a Barrage, a Topiary Stomper, and 2 copies of Sunfall. So Grayson's hand has some stuff, but not a lot of mana to cast that stuff. What do we think you take here from Matt? My guess is probably Barrage, because you want to keep your Tidebinder pressure in play.
Yeah, and also if you leave the Barrage and take something else, the Barrage can just kill the bat and then get back that card. So you can constrict the options by taking Barrage. You might also think, well, that at least makes Grayson use a mana. So let's say Grayson doesn't draw a land. Okay, he uses the Barrage, but then can't cast a Stomper again on the same turn or something. So yeah, it looks like Hoey's going to try and choke the mana there. And even if Grayson does draw the right kind of land to do that, not the end of the world. But
Yeah.
the Cavern is a nice draw there. That does the job.
That's the perfect draw, because then, yeah, Cavern. Well, I guess you Cavern on Dinosaur, which does, gets you through a potential Make Disappear too. So that's actually huge. I can't quite tell if Hoey had the Make Disappear. It looks like I think Destroy Evil, go for the throat, and then a potential third card here. I'm not sure what that last card is. And then so Grayson able to hit the land drops, and then we know about those 2 Sunfalls. So is able to really kind of, if the board gets a little bit too clogged, then can sort of try to reset with one of those Sunfalls. And is also set up very, very well to draw an Archangel, right? Because now we have double white and the other red to be able to pay for it, so we can Archangel get down that Tidebinder if Grayson finds one of those.
Yeah, so this turn worked out perfectly for Grayson. Hoey's going to need ideally another source of pressure and more disruption to stay in it, because otherwise, those Sunfalls and just all the big hitters are going to keep taking over.
All right, so we'll have to see what Hoey picks up here.
So Herd Migration getting cycled here. And I think you saw Hoey use the Destroy Evil on the Beanstalk finally. I think realizing that, look, at this point, if Grayson is going to be drawing more cards every time he casts a Sunfall or something, he's going to be getting to 6 or 7 mana, and then all of his big hits are on the table. Whereas this way, he casts a Sunfall, but then maybe, whereas if all those Sunfalls are drawing extra cards, then it becomes more tricky. And Wandering Emperor is actually a nice extra source of pressure here. 6 around after a Sunfall, but can add some pressure here, go wide if you want to, or you can stack up counters on one particular thing. So really nice pickup. And if he has something like Make Disappear or Disdainful Stroke to pair with it, then I think Hoey might be back in the driver's seat.
Yeah, this is, if you think about clocks, right, you go Wandering Emperor, counter on the 2/2, hit for 6, that puts Grayson to 8, and then the additional counter is 1 point short next turn. But if you can make up that damage with the Restless Anchorage, then theoretically you would have a lethal attack next turn. So we're going to go counter on the Tidebinder, and we are going to hit for 6. See if Grayson has any responses. Looks like we do not. And I don't know, I'm looking at Grayson's life pad. Okay, Grayson is, so we're taking 6, falling to 11 there. Okay. I think we may have had the life totals wrong, because I think we might have missed the 3 from the Herd Migration. I think it's where we're off.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned the Anchorage, which has just been kind of tucked away at the back there since Hoey's first turn, but that card is a big piece of the puzzle against Domain, where after they sweep the board, you now immediately have another source of pressure once again. And that often is the difference between, falling too far behind or being able to get across the finish line.
Yep. And then Duress going to take the other Sunfall, it looks like. And, Hoey could maybe go fire up the Anchorage, counter on it with the Wandering Emperor, hit for 3. That puts Grayson to 8. Looks like we're going to go for a token here. Token attack for 2, Grayson to 9, get a map. And then next turn you can make it a 2-turn clock with the Wandering Emperor counter because it's 5 and 5. We're also going to go for map post combat to potentially look for something to cast next turn. Finds a Go for the Throat, doesn't need access to that at this point, and kind of at the mercy of whether or not Grayson can find a good top deck here. I mean, we're looking for an Archangel. That's probably the best one.
Yeah, and it's interesting how often we end up saying that, right? For now, though, Grayson, if he doesn't find some big thing, probably best option is just to flip the incubator, try and finish the Emperor off, force a chump on the token. But we'll see if anything else appeals to him.
Yeah, turns out go for the Throat, not so great against these incubator tokens. Better against the Traxxas and Angels of the world. There's also, I don't know if this maybe comes up, but there's a Mirex over there chilling on Grayson's side that can maybe sort of help pressure the Atraxa, but I guess we'd have to find an answer for the 2/2 to make that relevant.
Yeah, I think the Emperor it's not a win condition by itself at this point. It's almost holding something up to distract everything else while the Anchorage finishes the job here. So yeah, we're going to see Sunfall just making a baby incubator, and then that in turn clears the way for the big one to finish off the Wandering Emperor. So Grayson has the more impressive board, but is on a 3-turn clock, and Hoey has the Anchorage. So you're again like these creature lands just really coming in clutch here.
Yeah, Anchorage looking very, very impressive. Grayson's cast 2 Wraths this game, 2 Sunfalls, was able to answer the multiple creatures, able to answer the Wandering Emperor, and this Anchorage, like, if you look at the removal spells in Grayson's deck list, those Leyland Bindings do not touch this Anchorage. So, Matthew or Hoey is in a very, very clear spot to win this race as of right now. And it's going to come down to whether or not Grayson can find maybe an Angel or something along those lines to sort of stymie the tide a little bit.
Yeah, I mean Grayson's deck is full of bangers at this point, but also full of mana sources and these conditional sweepers and so on. So he's only got a draw step or 2, but there's a lot of good hits here. And Hoey kind of missing after things worked out so well for him in the mid game, has not really found any more action yet.
Yeah, big draw step, and that is an invasion. So that is going to do it. Matthew Hoey going to go ahead and win game number 2. With just on the back of that Restless Anchorage, just very, very surprising at how well that was able to kind of answer multiple of those sweepers. And we'll be going to game 3 here in just very, very shortly. There is me. Okay, so I don't know if we are ready to go. I don't know if we lost Dom here for a second, but I don't know if we're ready to go to game number 3. If we do have that up, we will, because it's a time-shifted match, we will go ahead and get that for you in just a second. There, Dom's back. Hey, Dom.
Hello. Yeah, I think that game 2 is how a lot of these games go, right? Where it's kind of down to the wire. One top deck on either side could dramatically swing how the game plays out, but then the Esper deck just about crawls over the line just in time. On the draw, though, going to be a lot harder in game 3. So even though I think, as we said, Hoey improves more in sideboarding, just play versus draw. I mean, people say this about every deck in every format, right? But certainly is no less true here than it is anywhere else. It does matter a lot.
Pretty big duress here, able to take up the Beanstalk. And I don't know if you take a look at Grayson's hand, but we kept 6 lands Beanstalk, so there are no spells left over here after this duress. That is a massive, massive duress here for Hoey.
Yeah, although one of the nice things about the Triomes is that if you're flooded, you can just cycle those, keep trying to take fraction, and maybe Hoey has some kind of hand which is disruptive but not fast, doesn't have much pressure, and at that point, Grayson has a lot of live top decks and a lot of draw steps to find them.
Absolutely. It looks like we picked up the red Triomes. We're going to go ahead and play that. I believe we have Jund Bant. I think that's a Jund one, but I'm not 100% positive. Chad, if I get it wrong, please don't yell at me at home. We don't have Mason here to confirm me. I don't know. Maybe we can put Dom to the test.
Okay, so I think that's Gemma's Garden Sparrow's headquarters.
Okay.
Although
I thought it was Zia Torres, but
although that doesn't help unless you know what those mean. Like, not sure what a Raugen Triome is when it's at home. But here is Deep Cavern Bat, which is kind of funny how Bat is at its worst when your opponent's hand is also at its worst, which applying a little bit of beatdown, doing its
Swing and a
best.
miss. I mean, that's just Delver. That's Delver before it flips. We picked up a Topiary Stomper here for Grayson. It's going to go ahead and find us another land. Not quite able to play offense or defense yet. We need a couple more lands for that to happen. And yeah, I mean, it's really just going to come down to whether or not Grayson can find a payoff, and if Matthew has a counterspell or some sort of answer for that payoff. A little bit of pressure in play, nothing too crazy now, but that Virtue in a couple of turns might be able to turn up the pressure a little bit for Matthew.
Yeah, this is not a matchup where Virtue kind of comes into play, but games like this where neither player is really doing anything, that's where having that free extra option really shines.
Ooh, I don't know if you took a peek at the draw step there for Grayson, Dom, but that was an Archangel of Wrath. We've been saying it this whole match. It would be really nice for Grayson if he drew an Archangel of Wrath, and right on time, finally drew one. So we'll have to see if Matt Hoey does have a counter spell. We got some players looking towards judges. Oh, there's the Cavern of Souls. I guess the counter spell doesn't even matter.
Yeah, and he has a few other ways to neuter part of it. So you've got Urtide, countering abilities, Sashana's Tidebinder. But Tidebinder versus Archangel is a little strange because if you double kick it, there are two separate triggers. So you can counter one of those and then turn off the lifelink. But then something is still getting shot for two, and there's still a solution at best.
All right. I don't know if there's some sort of judge call here. We got players looking at the camera, looking at the other match. We'll have to see what is okay. There's Cavern, so I would assume Cavern on Angel. We're going to cast this Archangel, and like you said, we'll have to see if Hoey has one of the Urtais or Shana's Tidebinders. Taking a look at his hand, I don't think I see one. I think I see Destroy Evil, multiple copies. That might be an Emperor though, so you could Emperor put a counter on the 2/2 to save it from the Archangel trigger. That could be something that Hoey wants to go towards.
Sure, yeah, then you pump it again. It's a 4/4 that can attack, and maybe you kill the Archangel after that. So it's not nothing. But as I learned the hard way the first time this came up, even killing the Archangel in response to the triggers, it still had lifelink, last I checked. So still going to gain that life buffer back, which if that wasn't the case, that would actually be highly relevant in a lot of these like close racing games. This is not one of those, and certainly it's not anymore after the Archangel does his thing.
Absolutely. So, and maybe I was mistaken. Maybe that wasn't an Emperor, or we're saving the Emperor to be able to kill the Archangel. That could be interesting. But maybe I had the read wrong. Maybe that wasn't an Emperor.
Right, which my read was the same as yours, but I actually wonder, given the threat of Emperor, I wonder if Grayson's even meant to attack with the Archangel here. Just attack with your Vigilant Stomper. Don't give Matt. Yeah, there it is. Don't give Harry a good target, and just keep doing your thing. Make him waste his mana every turn. Waste his time.
See, it's a little. I'm wondering about that sequence. So, if you Emperor put a counter on the 2/2, like you said, you can follow up, make another counter, make it a 4/4 first strike, and then have Destroy Evil to answer the Archangel. But it looks like Hoey has decided to, take it to the different library, waiting on the Angel to attack to Emperor it, and then now maybe can load up on the Deep Cavern Bat. Interesting decision here for Hoey. Maybe prioritizes the Destroy Evil and wants to save that for something down the road.
And a very timely bat here, taking the second Archangel, which the bat itself is still a little fragile, but that Archangel would have been a backbreaking follow-up. So if Grayson misses again, maybe Hoey has a window back in, but Grayson's separating out some mana here.
Yeah, we drew something, unless we're...
So I don't know if I like those odds.
Well, that's a lot of mana.
Oh, well, okay.
Sometimes you get Thoughtseize bugged, I guess.
It's a third Archangel that gets you, as it turns out.
Yeah.
And get him, it sure will. This is a massacre.
Yeah, kill your Emperor, kill your Deep Cavern Bat, get another Archangel. I mean, this game just, again, we call games too early on coverage, but this one's going to be really, really tough for Matt for Ho to get out of. Yeah, I'm wondering. I wonder how different this game would have been if we had taken the other line where we go Emperor, make it a 3/3, untap, make it a 4/4, attack, destroy evil your Archangel. I don't know. I mean, it's obviously a different game, but that's interesting to think about. But in any case, Grayson going to grab that Archangel back, and can even just start getting in with the Topiary Stomper. This one is slipping away little by little here for Hoey.
Yeah, that big decision point is interesting because Grayson may have thought if Hoey had the Emperor, he would want to save his token in that way. And so if he didn't, maybe he thinks the coast is cleared to start attacking with the Archangel. Whereas if Hoey kind of has the read that I'm going to get to eat the Archangel with the Emperor, I think it makes sense to hold it at that point. So a lot of it comes down to just your read on your opponent. Although it's always weird with the Emperor, where often you try and like play well or play thoughtfully by not attacking with stuff, and then they don't have it, and your caution or your cowardice is just like giving them all the time in the world to make it happen.
Yeah, now there's a Rafine here for Hoey, so was able to find another bat to take the Archangel and a Rafine, so not too bad. I mean, a decent number of setup, but at this point, just at the mercy of the top of Grayson's deck, as we talked about. This domain deck just has a whole bunch of just unbelievable top decks. And there's a Chrome Host Seed Shark. That's not necessarily one of the better ones, but I mean, it's not even that bad. They can check the Deep Cavern Bat for a little bit, make attacks awkward for Hoey, and if that couples with any other expensive card later down the road, then the incubator tokens can start to amount a massive amount of pressure here.
Yeah, things have weirdly kind of stabilized, but in a way that still definitely favors Grayson. So I guess if Matt can kill, I guess we can attack first, and then if we have a removal spell, kind of reconsider once we've connived.
I think the hand for Hoey is Disdainful Stroke, Destroy Evil, and Rafine's Tower. So we're discarding the Rafine's Tower, going to keep Destroy Evil, Disdainful Stroke. So now I guess you can just blow up the Chrome Host Sea Shark if you want to. We're going to go for Virtue. I like that play because you kind of have to hope that Grayson can brick a draw step anyways, and this Virtue can actually put a decent amount of pressure on Grayson.
That's 7 mana.
Uh-oh.
Okay, Okay.
Oh, it was end step.
Never mind.
Did you see what Grayson did there? He just took Grayson did the top card of the deck right into play. I love it. Just that was beautiful. And it was a Plains.
I would definitely draw my card, excitedly separate out 7 lands, and then just kidding. Go. You gotta put the fear in him. But I like the Virtue play too. It feels scary to like take the shield down, but if it works, well, now actually Hoey's building a board, and he can start making these good attacks. He can start conniving onto the bat, and the bat has lifelink, so he's clawing some of that life back. So you take an immediate risk, but the payoff is really high, and you're seeing that now, right? We'll pass a turn. We'll now have 2 things that Grayson can't attack into, and actually Hoey is kind of establishing control, which it only takes one uncountable top deck Distractor to mess that all up, but we have a map to the end now.
Yeah, I mean, Hoey's hand is crazy now. He's got Disdainful Stroke, Negate, and Destroy Evil in hand, so has a lot of stuff covered. We're essentially down 3 Archangels because there's 1 under the bat, and then 2 of them are gone in other means. So only 1 of those left. The Atraxas, as we talked about, but Hoey has kind of everything else covered. We have Sunfall covered, Herd Migration, Leyline Binding, all of that stuff. And yeah, choosing to interesting choice choosing not to kill the Seed Shark. I guess we're saving that Destroy Evil for maybe a Resolve the Traxa or a potential Leyline Binding, which I guess kind of makes sense. And here's a Sunfall here for Grayson. Hoey can just kind of choose whichever counterspell he wants to use.
Yeah, I mean that can sure get stroked. It does leave a big incubator behind anyway, thanks to Shark, but we're reaching the point where that 5/5 is kind of too small to really matter, just given what Hoey has on board.
Yeah, we have currently a 5/5 bat drawing 2. We can discard 2 spells to make it a 7/7. I mean, we just Dom, we've built our own Atraxa. We have a 7/7 flying lifelink. Okay, we're putting counters on Rafine.
That's a Sphinx demon something. It's close enough.
So, I mean,
And Anchorage too. So really nice follow up against potential sweeper or just another attacker joining the fray next.
yeah, I
turn.
mean, look at this. Grayson is at 11 and Hoey just has lethal, right? We have 5, 10, 11, 12, 14 power, and we can blow up the Seed Shark with Destroy Evil. This game is just over. I mean, Grayson could, I guess, find, it has to be Atraxa, right? It has to be Atraxa into something else because that can't be countered. Can be Destroy Eviled, but there's still the other counterspell here for Hoey, too.
Did we say this game is just over already, but not in this direction? Who's to say?
It's like the classic "you said GG, but I meant," or "you said GG, but I meant BG" kind of thing. We have an invasion here. That is not going to do it. We're getting a reader on the backside. I think the backside has reach. Let me double check. No, backside does not have reach, so it doesn't even have to worry about that card.
The secret hidden reach. Okay.
No hidden reach, no questing beast.
I just assume anything that's large enough that's green has reach until proven otherwise. Does that one doesn't have reach?
Yeah,
You can't get that one
that's
past me.
true. We are going to negate it, and yeah, this Destroy Evil. Or yeah, we didn't discard. Yeah, there it is. Destroy Evil, and that is going to do it. Wow. Matt Hoey taking the match 2-1 over Grayson Nemitz. I gotta be honest, Tom. I did not think that game was going to go that way after that Archangel off the top killing the Emperor and the other token, or killing the Deep Cavern Bat, the token. That was a crazy game.
Wild stuff. Hoey, I don't know if he was as demoralized as I would have been one back from that spot. Incredibly impressive, and saw that window, as we said, to like take the shields down for the virtue, but knowing how high the reward was if it worked, it did. And yeah, Hoey, and instead of being 0-3 and not eliminated, but feeling pretty down, well, now once you come back from a spot like that, you feel like you also want to, but you've got that fire going. You feel like the only way is up.